Tonight, we embark on a journey through the life of one of history's most remarkable figures. A Roman emperor who ruled the world's greatest empire yet sought wisdom and philosophy, a warrior who penned timeless reflections on peace, and a man of absolute power who strived for humility. This is the story of Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor, and the profound work known as Meditations. Welcome to our channel. If you enjoy historical and philosophical content like this, please take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss our new releases. Let us travel now to the heart of the Roman Empire at its zenith, to a time when peace reigned across 3 continents yet the seeds of decline were quietly being sown. In the middle of the 2nd century, the empire stretched from the Scottish highlands to the deserts of Arabia, from the Atlantic Ocean to the Euphrates River. Under the Pax Romana, millions lived in relative prosperity and safety. Yet beneath this veneer of stability, the wheels of history were turning. A child was about to be born whose life would not only shape Rome's destiny but would leave an indelible mark on human thought for millennia to come. On the 26th of April in the year 121, a boy was born into one of Rome's most distinguished aristocratic families. His name was Marcus Annius Verus, carrying the same name as his father. No one could have predicted the extraordinary destiny that awaited this infant, but the child born that spring day would become one of history's greatest philosophers and Rome's last great emperor. When Marcus was just 3 years old, tragedy struck. His father died, leaving the young boy in the care of his mother Domitia Lucilla and his grandfather, also named Marcus Annius Verus. This early loss, perhaps, planted the first seeds of the philosophical outlook that would define his life, an intimate understanding of life's fragility and impermanence. Marcus's family belonged to Rome's elite. His grandfather had served as consul twice, holding one of the highest political offices in the Roman state. His mother Domitia Lucilla was heiress to one of Rome's greatest fortunes, owning extensive brickworks that supplied construction materials throughout the empire. Yet this wealth and privilege did not spoil young Marcus. Instead, it instilled in him a profound sense of responsibility and humility. His grandfather taught him the importance of good character and the avoidance of bad habits. Years later, in Meditations, Marcus would express his gratitude, thanking his grandfather for showing him integrity and good character. The education of young Marcus began at age 7, following the customary pattern for aristocratic Roman boys. He received tutoring at home from the finest teachers money could procure. But Marcus was no ordinary student. His intellectual acuity and hunger for knowledge astonished even his most learned instructors. Among his early teachers was Diognetus, a painter who introduced Marcus to philosophy. Under Diognetus's guidance, at the age of 12, Marcus made a decision that would transform his life. He would dedicate himself to the study of philosophy. This commitment was not merely academic. Marcus adopted the rough Greek cloak of the philosophers, slept on the ground, and embraced an austere lifestyle. His mother managed to convince him to sleep on a bed at least, but Marcus's determination to live philosophically was unshakable. This extreme asceticism damaged his health, but nothing could deter the young philosopher. For Marcus, philosophy was not an abstract theoretical pursuit but a way of life, a daily practice. The principles of Stoicism penetrated deep into his young mind. Virtue, self-discipline, logic, and living in accordance with nature became his guiding lights. Among Marcus's many tutors, several stand out. Alexander of Codium taught him the works of Homer and refined his literary style. But perhaps the most influential was Junius Rusticus, who introduced Marcus to the writings of Epictetus, the Stoic philosopher. Epictetus had been born a slave but gained his freedom and became one of Stoicism's most important teachers. His work, the Discourses, profoundly shaped Marcus's thinking. Epictetus taught simple yet profound truths. Distinguish between what you can control and what you cannot. Focus on being virtuous. Pay attention not to external events but to your responses to them. These teachings became the bedrock of Marcus's philosophy. By age 16, Marcus was already recognized as an unusually serious, thoughtful, and remarkably mature young man. Emperor Hadrian took notice of this exceptional youth and gave him the nickname Verissimus, most truthful. This was a recognition of Marcus's honesty and strength of character. In Hadrian's eyes, this boy was special, perhaps even destined to be Rome's future. Hadrian was one of Rome's greatest emperors. He had consolidated the empire's vast territories, strengthened its borders, and was a great patron of arts and architecture. But as he aged, his greatest concern was the succession. Who would carry Rome's future? His first choice was Lucius Aelius Commodus, and Marcus was betrothed to Aurelius's daughter. But fate intervened. Aurelius died in 138, before ever becoming emperor. Hadrian needed a new plan. Hadrian's revised succession strategy was masterly. He chose Antoninus Pius as his heir, but with a crucial condition: Antoninus must adopt both Marcus and the young Lucius Commodus as his sons. This decision transformed Marcus's life. At 17 he became heir to the imperial throne. His name changed to Marcus Aurelius Aurelius Verus. Hadrian died that same year, and Antoninus Pius ascended to the throne. Marcus was now the future emperor, though he would wait 23 years before assuming that awesome responsibility. These years of waiting were far from wasted. Marcus learned the art of imperial governance under Antoninus's tutelage. Antoninus Pius was an exemplary teacher, calm, wise, just, and merciful. Under his guidance, Marcus learned the daily operations of government, relations with the Senate, administration of the provinces, and the countless details that went into ruling the world's greatest empire. Antoninus's reign was remarkably peaceful and stable. For 23 years, Rome enjoyed freedom from major wars. The economy prospered, the people were content. This period provided Marcus with invaluable training, not just in theory but in practice. Knowing philosophy was one thing, applying it to the real world of governance was quite another. In 140, at age 19, Marcus was elected consul, one of Rome's most prestigious positions. He would serve as consul 3 times during his life. In 145 he married Faustina, his cousin and the daughter of Antoninus Pius. Faustina was beautiful and intelligent. Their marriage was long and fruitful, producing 13 or 14 children. But they also endured profound tragedy. Most of their children died young. Only a handful survived to adulthood, including the future Emperor Commodus and Marcus's beloved daughter Lucilla. During these years under Antoninus, Marcus did not neglect his philosophical studies. He maintained extensive correspondence with his teacher Fronto, Rome's most celebrated rhetorician. But Marcus gradually tired of Fronto's rhetorical exercises, the practiced arguments on hypothetical topics, the artificial speeches. His interest in philosophy, particularly Stoicism, deepened. Fronto tried to discourage him from philosophy, warning him, "It is better not to touch philosophical doctrines at all, or only to sip them with the edge of the lips." But Marcus could not be deterred. Philosophy was not a hobby for him, it was the meaning of life itself. As Antoninus's reign drew to a close, Marcus assumed greater administrative responsibilities. In 160 he and Lucius Verus were elected joint consuls for the following year. But Antoninus would not live to see it. In March of 161 at age 75 Antoninus died. His death was peaceful, surrounded by his family. His last words were simple but profound: "Be at peace." He entrusted the empire and his daughter to Marcus. The golden statue of Fortune, kept in the imperial bedroom, was moved to Marcus's chamber. Then Antoninus turned away, pretended to sleep, and died. March 7, 161. Marcus Aurelius was now emperor. He was 40 years old. His entire life had prepared him for this moment, yet the imperial office held no appeal for him. His Stoic training had made his duty crystal clear. The Senate wanted to make Marcus sole emperor, but he refused. Unless Lucius Verus received equal powers, he would not accept the position. This was an extraordinary decision. Never in Roman history had an emperor voluntarily shared power as an equal. But Marcus remained true to his Stoic principles. He valued justice and equality. The Senate agreed. Marcus and Lucius became co-emperors. The joint rule of 2 emperors presented challenges. Marcus and Lucius were very different in temperament. Marcus was serious, philosophical, and disciplined. Lucius was more extravagant, hosting lavish parties and distributing expensive gifts. The Historia Augusta recounts one of Lucius's parties where he gave away golden and silver vessels, jeweled bowls, and even carriages. The party cost 6 million sesterces, equivalent to approximately $60 million today. When Marcus heard about this, he reportedly wept for the fate of the world. Despite their differences, Marcus and Lucius formed an effective partnership. The people loved them. They allowed freedom of speech, supported the arts and education, and even slightly devalued the currency to stimulate the economy. People appreciated their humility. As their biographer notes, no one regretted Pius's gentle ways. Rome seemed to be thriving under these 2 emperors. But this peace was short-lived. In 161, news arrived from the east. Vologases IV, king of Parthia, had invaded Armenia, a Roman protectorate. This was an act of war. Syria was in revolt. Rome had to act. Lucius, having more military experience, departed for the east to lead the campaign. Marcus remained in Rome, managing the empire's daily affairs. Lucius's Parthian campaign was successful, though the real credit belonged to his generals, especially Avidius Cassius. Cassius was a brilliant commander known for harsh discipline. In 164 he defeated the Parthians at Dura Europos. In 165 he captured two major Parthian cities on the Tigris, Seleucia and Ctesiphon. Ctesiphon was the Parthian capital. Cassius burned Vologases' palace. He destroyed Seleucia despite its surrender. It was a great victory, but it came at a terrible cost. A mysterious disease appeared in the army. In 165, the first symptoms were observed. The soldiers had contracted this plague in Seleucia. The disease spread through the army, then throughout the entire empire. The Antonine Plague, as it came to be known, was one of Rome's greatest catastrophes. The disease was probably smallpox or measles. The symptoms were horrific: high fever, diarrhea, vomiting, throat pain, and worst of all, red and black pustules covering the entire body. The Greek physician Galen closely observed the disease. Those who survived to the 9th day usually recovered, but most did not last that long. The plague spread along trade routes, through military camps, through crowded cities. At its peak, 2,000 people were dying daily in Rome. The plague lasted 15 years, spanning nearly Marcus's entire reign. Death toll estimates are disputed, but most historians believe 7 to 10% of the empire's population perished, approximately 5 to 7.5 million people. Some estimates are even higher. The disease devastated the army, destroyed the economy, and shook society to its foundations. Cities were emptied, fields went unplanted, the workforce collapsed. Rome was witnessing the end of its golden age. How did Marcus Aurelius cope with this catastrophe? As a Stoic, he was trained to accept fate. But he was also a leader who could not ignore his people's suffering. He sold the imperial treasury's treasures to raise relief funds. He distributed food and medical supplies. He implemented basic sanitation measures. But most importantly, he did not flee. Many senators retreated to their rural villas, but Marcus stayed in Rome, making decisions, maintaining order. The historian Cassius Dio writes that Marcus showed genuine empathy for the people. When someone remarked, "Those who die in the plague are blessed," Marcus reportedly wept openly. Stoicism kept him steady, but it did not eliminate his emotions. He felt the pain, but he learned to live with it. In Meditations he asks, "Why complain about a bad thing? If it is part of human nature, accept it. If it is not part of nature, change it." He could not change the plague, but he could control his response to it. With the Parthian War concluded, Rome faced another crisis. From the north, from Germania, came disturbing news. Barbarians were crossing the borders. In 166, the Marcomanni and Quadi tribes crossed the Danube River and attacked a Roman city. Marcus and Lucius immediately took action. They had to go to the northern frontier. But first, they were battling the plague that the army had brought back from Parthia. At Aquileia, during the winter of 168–69, plague erupted among the troops. Galen observed this outbreak and tried to develop treatment methods. In 169, another tragedy struck. Lucius Verus died. He probably died of the plague, though some sources mention a stroke. After 8 years of joint rule, Marcus was now alone. Losing Lucius was hard. Despite Lucius's faults, he had been a loyal partner, a brother. Marcus arranged a magnificent funeral, named a bridge after him. But there was no time for extended mourning. The Germanic tribes were intensifying their attacks. Rome's northern borders were in danger. Marcus would spend the rest of his life in what became known as the Marcomannic Wars, a long, grueling conflict. These wars lasted from 166 until 180, 14 years. Marcus spent most of this time in military camps along the Danube River, in Pannonia, at Carnuntum, at Vindobona. Cold winters, harsh conditions, constant dangers. For a philosopher, this battlefield was hell. But Marcus did not shirk his duty. The war was merciless. The barbarians were numerous and fierce warriors. The Roman army was weakened by plague. Marcus tried every method to recruit soldiers. He enlisted gladiators and even slaves. This was a dangerous decision. Several years later, many deserted, and because they were well equipped and trained, they plundered cities, triggering a crime wave across the empire. But Marcus had no choice. He had to fight. During the Marcomannic Wars, Marcus's military abilities emerged. He was not merely a peacetime philosopher but a warrior. He made strategic decisions, commanded armies, negotiated diplomatic agreements. In 173 he defeated the Quadi and Iazyges tribes. He caught enemies retreating across the frozen Danube River and destroyed them. In 174 he sent one army against the Iazyges and another against the Quadi. He won victories on both fronts. But victory came at great cost. Soldiers died from hunger, thirst, and disease. Once, a Roman force besieged by the Quadi was dying of thirst. Then suddenly rain and hail fell. The soldiers were saved. Marcus saw this as a miracle. Some attributed it to Christian soldiers' prayers, others called it a natural occurrence. But for Marcus, it was part of nature, part of the universe's order. Stoicism had taught him that everything happens for a reason. By 175, Marcus was nearly victorious. The Iazyges were begging for peace. The Marcomanni and Quadi were weakened. Marcus planned to turn their territories into Roman provinces, Marcomannia and Sarmatia. Rome would expand beyond the Danube. But then news arrived. From the east, from Syria. Avidius Cassius had declared himself emperor. Cassius was the hero of the Parthian War, governor of Syria, and the most powerful commander in the east. He held the title Rector Orientis, with imperial authority over all eastern provinces. But now he was rebelling. The reason was simple. He had heard false reports of Marcus's death. Marcus had fallen ill during the Marcomannic Wars, perhaps contracting plague. When Cassius heard these reports, he acted hastily. He declared himself emperor, claiming Marcus's army in Pannonia had chosen him. Some sources claim Faustina sent these false reports to Cassius. Faustina feared Marcus's death. Their son Commodus was still young. She wanted a strong leader on the throne. But these claims may be mere gossip. The truth is uncertain. Cassius took control of Egypt, Syria, and Arabia. 7 legions obeyed his commands. Rome stood on the brink of civil war. What did Marcus feel when he heard this news? Anger, disappointment, sadness? Cassius was a commander he had trusted. But Marcus remembered his Stoic principles. Tolerate people's mistakes because we are all flawed beings. Marcus gathered his forces, prepared to march east. But he did not rush. He made a hasty peace agreement with the barbarian tribes, securing the northern frontier. Then he assembled troops to fight Cassius. But before Marcus reached the east, Cassius was dead. One of his own soldiers, a centurion, killed him. He cut off Cassius's head and sent it to Marcus as a show of loyalty. Marcus refused to look at it. "Order it buried," he said. Cassius's rebellion lasted only 3 months and 6 days. Egypt recognized Marcus again as emperor on July 28, 175. Cassius never minted coins. His revolt was swift and unsuccessful. But Marcus did not relax. He continued to the east with his advisors and his wife Faustina. He did not want to punish Cassius's supporters severely, but he needed to restore order. He had all of Cassius's correspondence burned. "I do not want to read them," he said, to avoid unnecessary vengeance. But some punishments were unavoidable. Cassius's son Avidius Mesianus was executed. His other son Avidius Heliodorus was exiled. His daughter Avidia and her husband were placed under the protection of their uncle. During this journey Faustina died. In a village in Cappadocia, in winter 175 or spring 176. The cause of death is uncertain. Was it gout, or did she commit suicide fearing her collaboration with Cassius would be discovered? Cassius Dio is not sure. But Marcus suffered a deep loss. Faustina was his life partner, mother of 13 children. Marcus had a temple built for her, changed the village's name to Faustinopolis. He mourned, but duty continued. He visited the eastern provinces, re-established his authority. The people welcomed him warmly. The philosopher-emperor was just and merciful. In 177, Marcus returned to Rome. But he did not rest. The northern borders were again under threat. The barbarians had broken the peace agreement. Marcus had to return to the Danube. But this time he had an assistant. He made his 16-year-old son Commodus co-emperor. Commodus was the first emperor to be born during his father's reign, born in the purple, as they said. Marcus would try to teach him imperial governance, but there was a worry in his heart. Commodus was not like his father. He was not serious, not interested in philosophy. He was attracted to luxury, entertainment, and spectacle. Marcus saw this, but what could he do? Commodus was his only surviving son. Rome had not seen a biological son of an emperor ascend to the throne since Augustus. The 5 good emperors had all adopted their heirs, choosing based on merit. Marcus broke this tradition. He chose blood over merit. This might have been his greatest mistake. Marcus and Commodus went together on the northern campaigns. Marcus tried to teach his son about war, diplomacy, and governance. But Commodus was reluctant. He hated war and longed for Rome's luxuries. In 179, Marcus made a decision. He declared Commodus full co-Augustus with equal powers. Now there were two emperors, father and son, ruling together. But this partnership would not last long. Marcus's health was deteriorating. He had been frail throughout his life, suffering from chronic ailments. The plague had probably infected him too. In early 180, during the final phase of the Marcomannic Wars, Marcus's end approached. On March 17, 180, at Vindobona or Sirmium, in his military headquarters, he died. He was 58 years old. The cause of death is not certain. Plague, another illness, old age? Historians debate. But the result is the same. Rome's last great philosopher-emperor was dead. In Marcus's final days before death, he suffered. He felt the symptoms of illness. His doctors told him he had only days left. He summoned his 5 most trusted advisors and friends. He wanted to ensure Commodus's succession, to plan a peaceful transition. But his friends were frozen in grief. Marcus rebuked them. "Why are you adopting such an unphilosophical attitude? You should think about the effects of the Antonine Plague, about death in general." The philosopher remained stoic to the end. Marcus's body was returned to Rome. He was immediately deified, honored as one of Rome's greatest emperors. His ashes were placed in Hadrian's mausoleum, now known as Castel Sant'Angelo. A column was erected in his memory, the column of Marcus Aurelius, like Trajan's column, decorated with reliefs depicting his military victories. This column still stands in Rome today, a stone testament to Marcus's legacy. But Marcus's greatest legacy was not stone or bronze. It was words. It was thoughts. His work Meditations made him immortal. This work was his private journal, notes he wrote to himself. He never intended to publish it. It had no title. The name Meditations was given later. The original title may have been, in Greek, tais huton, notes to oneself. How did Marcus write these notes? When, where? The answers lie within the work itself. At the beginning of some books are small notations. One note says written while fighting the Quadi on the banks of the Granua River. Another says written at Carnuntum. Carnuntum and Aquincum were Roman legionary fortresses along the Danube. Marcus wrote in military camps at night by candlelight, recording his own thoughts. Was writing Meditations a form of therapy for Marcus? Stoic exercises were tools for self-discipline. Writing, thinking, reminding oneself. Each night, Marcus would sit and review his day. What did he do well? What did he do wrong? How could he improve? Stoicism was continuous self-improvement. Meditations was a record of this process. The structure of the work is intriguing. It consists of 12 books written at different periods. Book 1 is special. Marcus expresses gratitude to people who influenced his life, to his teachers, to his family. He writes what he learned from each. From his grandfather, good character. From his mother, respect for the gods. From his teachers, philosophy. From Antoninus, the art of government. The other books consist of shorter notes. They range from a single sentence to several paragraphs. Topics constantly recur. Death, virtue, nature, duty, acceptance of fate, controlling anger, showing mercy to others. Marcus writes the same ideas again and again because he needs to remember, to convince himself. When you wake in the morning, tell yourself, "Today I shall meet meddling, ungrateful, violent, treacherous, envious, unsocial people. They are all like this because they do not know good from evil." Marcus acknowledges humanity's flaws but tries to forgive them. Do not be angry with them, for they act in ignorance. Try to teach them. If you cannot teach them, be patient. For the gods are patient even with them. This compassion is the essence of Stoicism. We are all part of the same cosmic order, we are all kin. Death is a constant theme in Meditations. Marcus reminds himself not to fear death. Death is part of life. Like birth, it is a natural process. Why should you fear it? Everything comes and goes. Emperors, philosophers, ordinary people all die. Alexander the Great and his stable boy share the same fate. Both ultimately return to dust. Accepting death's inevitability is freedom. There is no longer need for fear. Virtue is Marcus's most important concept. According to Stoicism, the only real good is virtue. Wealth, fame, power, these are indifferents, preferable but not true goods. Virtue is doing what is right, honesty, courage, justice, wisdom. Marcus constantly asks himself, is this action virtuous? Is this the right thing? Sometimes the answer is clear, sometimes it is not. But asking the question is what matters. Duty is another major theme. Marcus did not want to be emperor, but duty called him. Stoicism teaches living in accordance with nature. For Marcus, his nature was leadership. Therefore, governing Rome was his duty. If you do not want to wake up in the morning, tell yourself, I awaken to do the work of a human being. Why should I complain about doing the work for which I was created? Duty may not satisfy you, but it must be done. Acceptance of fate is a central Stoic teaching. Marcus learned to accept what he could not control. Whether others' actions, the power to influence the empire's fate, he could not change these. But he could control his own thoughts, his reactions. If external events disturb you, the problem is not the event itself but your judgment of it. And you can erase that judgment now. Meditations is a deeply personal document. Marcus reveals his weaknesses, fears, and doubts. He is not perfect, but he is trying to be perfect. He constantly sets standards for himself, then struggles to meet those standards. Sometimes he fails, but he tries again. This effort is inspiring. But Meditations is also full of paradoxes. Marcus emphasizes life's meaninglessness, the transience of everything. Everything flows like a river. The physical world exists for a moment, then disappears. The mental world is as fleeting as smoke. Fame is worthless. Life is short. This might seem like nihilism. But Marcus finds meaning in this transience. Because every moment is valuable. Living in the present, being virtuous, this is enough. The early history of Meditations is uncertain. When and how it survived is unknown. The 3rd century historian Herodian mentions Marcus's literary legacy but does not explicitly name Meditations. The Historia Augusta, written in the 4th century, records that before Marcus left for the Marcomannic Wars, he was asked to publish his Principles of Philosophy, but instead he discussed his precepts for 3 days. This may be a reference to Meditations, but it is not certain. The first clear mention of Meditations comes in the 10th century. A clergyman named Arethusa said he possessed a copy of the work. Arethusa's copy is lost, but it was probably the ancestor of the surviving manuscripts. The Suda lexicon, published in the late 10th century, is the first source to mention dividing the work into 12 books. Suda says the Emperor Marcus directed his own life in 12 books. In the 12th century, John Setz's quotes from Meditations. In the 14th century, Nicephorus Callistus says, Marcus Antoninus wrote a book for his son Marcus, meaning Commodus, full of worldly experience and instructions. But this is a false attribution. Meditations was not for Commodus but for Marcus himself. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Meditations was rediscovered in Europe. Greek manuscripts were brought to Italy. Scholars read them and were amazed. Renaissance thinkers saw Marcus as the ideal leader, Plato's philosopher king embodied. In the 17th century, the first translations were made, Latin, English, French. The work reached a wider audience. In the 18th century, Meditations became very popular. Edward Gibbon, the famous historian, in his Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, described Marcus's reign as the period in the history of the world during which the human race was most happy and prosperous. This is ironic because Romans living in Marcus's time were struggling with plague, war, and crises. But Gibbon praised Marcus's character, his Stoic principles, his style of governance. In the 19th century, Meditations became a philosophical classic. John Stuart Mill, Matthew Arnold, Goethe, all read and were influenced by the work. Frederick the Great carried it as one of his favorite books. Marcus's thoughts penetrated deeply into the Western intellectual tradition. In the 20th century, Meditations remained popular. During World War II, soldiers read it and found resilience. During the Vietnam War, prisoners in camps memorized passages from Meditations. Bill Clinton quoted Marcus. Chinese leader Wen Jiabao reread the work countless times. Ridley Scott's film Gladiator introduced Marcus to mass audiences. Richard Harris portrayed the aged, wise emperor. Today, Meditations is still being read. Hundreds of thousands of copies are sold each year. Why? Because Marcus's message is timeless. Humanity's fundamental problems have not changed. How should we live? What should we do? How can we be good? Marcus offers answers. Not perfect answers, but honest ones. The beauty of Meditations is its sincerity. Marcus is not trying to impress others, not writing for an audience. He is talking to himself. This makes the work universal. Every reader recognizes Marcus's struggles. Anger, fear, disappointment. These are universal emotions. Marcus shows how to cope with them. He does not always succeed, but his effort inspires. Meditations is also paradoxical. It contains the private thoughts of the world's most powerful man. Marcus had absolute power, but he knew that power's limitations. He could not change people, could not change fate. He could only control himself. This humility makes meditation special. Marcus's Stoicism was not pure. He was influenced by Plato, the Epicureans, other philosophical schools. But the essence was Stoic. Live according to nature, be virtuous, accept fate, show compassion to others. These simple principles were enough for him. But Marcus's legacy is not just meditations. His life itself is a lesson. Despite having absolute power, he did not abuse it. He did not establish tyranny, maintain good relations with the Senate, cared about his people. Despite plague, war, and betrayal, he tried to remain honest. This was not easy. Many emperors failed under these challenges, became tyrants. Marcus did not. But Marcus made mistakes. His greatest mistake was perhaps choosing Commodus as his successor. Commodus was a disastrous emperor. His reign lasted 12 years, filled with terror, corruption, and megalomania. Commodus saw himself as the reincarnation of Hercules, participated in gladiator fights, killed exotic animals, changed Rome's name to Colonia Commodiana. Marcus knew Commodus's character. In Meditations, when expressing gratitude to Hadrian, he does not thank him. This is a deliberate omission. Perhaps Marcus did not approve of Hadrian's choices. Perhaps he was anxious about his own choice. When he looked at Commodus, what did he feel? Disappointment, sadness? We do not know. But Marcus chose blood over merit. This decision was disastrous for Rome. Commodus was assassinated in 192. His own wrestling partner strangled him. Senators, soldiers, the people, all were relieved. But Commodus's death brought chaos. The year of the 5 emperors, a period of civil war. Pertinax, Didius Julianus, Septimius Severus, Pescennius Niger, Clodius Albinus, all fought for the throne. Rome lost its stability. Pax Romana was over. Does Commodus's reign tarnish Marcus's legacy? Some historians think so. Marcus should have prepared his son better, or chosen another successor. But this was not easy. Commodus was his only surviving son. Marcus loved him, perhaps hoped he could change him. But he failed. Yet Marcus's legacy was not destroyed by Commodus. Meditations survived. Marcus's teachings spread. In subsequent centuries, philosophers, leaders, ordinary people drew inspiration from Marcus. Stoicism became a living philosophical tradition. Marcus's Stoicism is still relevant in the modern world. Today we live in an age filled with anxiety, stress, and uncertainty. Marcus's teachings can guide us. Accept what you cannot control, focus on what you can. Be virtuous, be honest, be compassionate. Live in the moment, do not worry about the future. Accept death, do not fear it. Meditations is one of the earliest examples of self-help literature. Marcus questioned how to improve himself, sought answers, practiced daily exercises. This process is still valid today. Keeping a journal, setting goals, practicing self-discipline, these are all things Marcus did. Marcus's life demonstrates philosophy in practice. Philosophy is not only learned from books, it is lived. Marcus applied Stoic principles everywhere, on the battlefield, in the palace, in meetings. Sometimes he succeeded, sometimes he did not. But his effort was continuous. Marcus's greatest struggle was perhaps with his own nature. As humans we have emotions, anger, fear, sadness. Marcus felt these but tried to control them. Meditations is a record of this internal war. Each note is a victory or a defeat. But Marcus never gave up. Marcus's death marked the end of an empire. But it was also the beginning of a legacy. Meditations survived for centuries, inspiring generations of people. Marcus is remembered as an emperor but more as a philosopher. His thoughts are more enduring than stone. The story of Marcus Aurelius is one of tragic beauty. A man with absolute power understood power's meaninglessness. A philosopher was forced to apply philosophy under the most difficult conditions. A father saw his son did not share his values. A leader could not prevent his empire's decline. But despite all this, he tried to remain honest. This effort made him immortal. Meditations is Marcus's voice, still speaking 2,000 years later. What is it telling us? Life is hard. Suffering is inevitable. Death awaits us all. But despite these things we can try to be virtuous. We can be compassionate to others. We can live in the moment. We can live according to nature. And perhaps this is enough. Marcus's last words were not recorded. But in Meditations we can find his final message. Death awaits you. Your time is short. Use this time virtuously. Because you will not get another chance. This simple advice is Marcus's legacy. More than 2,000 years ago, a Roman emperor sat in his military camp by candlelight and wrote his own thoughts. These notes were never designed for publication. But today millions of people read them. Why? Because Marcus Aurelius's message is universal. To be human is to struggle. But in that struggle we can find meaning, find purpose, find peace. Marcus Aurelius is no longer alive. But his words live. His thoughts live. Meditations is immortal. And every new reader continues Marcus's legacy. Now, let us delve deeper into the philosophical content of Meditations itself, examining the specific themes and teachings that have made this work endure across millennia. The acknowledgement to Antoninus Pius is particularly lengthy and detailed. Marcus lists dozens of qualities he learned from his adoptive father: how to endure labor, how to be content with few things, how to be moderate in all circumstances, how to regulate one's conduct in conformity with the same rules, how to neither be over-busy nor superfluous. He notes Antoninus's equality in all things, his invariability in his judgment, his foresight in the smallest things without parade. This extended tribute is more than filial duty, it is Marcus trying to internalize these qualities, to make them part of his own character. The remaining 11 books follow a different pattern. They consist of maxims, reflections, and reminders, often repetitive, returning again and again to the same themes. Modern readers sometimes find this repetition tedious, but it is precisely the point. Stoicism was not about acquiring new information but about continuous practice, constant reminding oneself of truths already known. Marcus was not writing for readers. He was drilling these principles into his own consciousness. One of the most persistent themes is the cosmic perspective. Marcus constantly reminds himself to see things from the viewpoint of the universe, not just his own limited perspective. Think of the whole of existence, of which you are the most tiny part. Think of the whole of time, of which you have been assigned a brief and fleeting moment. Think of fate and your place in it. This perspective is meant to be humbling. What is your anger, your ambition, your disappointment when viewed against the infinity of space and time? But this cosmic perspective does not lead to despair or nihilism. Instead, it leads to a kind of freedom. If everything is transient, if nothing truly matters in the grand scheme, then why waste energy on things beyond your control? You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. This is perhaps the most famous and most powerful idea in all of Stoicism: the dichotomy of control. Distinguish between what you can control, your thoughts, your responses, your character, and what you cannot control, other people's actions, natural events, the past, death. Focus your energy only on what you can control. Marcus applies this principle to various aspects of life. When dealing with difficult people, he reminds himself, they cannot help being who they are. They are acting according to their nature. Why should I be disturbed by this? When facing obstacles, he tells himself, the impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This is a radical reframing. Obstacles are not problems to be avoided but opportunities for virtue. Patience, courage, wisdom, these virtues can only be practiced when circumstances are difficult. Death receives extensive treatment in Meditations. Marcus thinks about death constantly, not morbidly but as a Stoic exercise. Meditate often on the swiftness of the passage of all things. Existence flows past us like a river. The universe is change, life itself is opinion. He lists the deaths of famous men, Alexander, Pompey, Caesar, Socrates, to remind himself that everyone dies regardless of power or wisdom. Where are they now? Nowhere. Or if anywhere, somewhere unknown. But this meditation on death has a purpose. It is meant to focus attention on the present. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. This is not meant to be frightening but liberating. If you could die at any moment, what matters? Not accumulating wealth or fame but living virtuously right now. Not planning for a distant future but being good in this present moment. Marcus also wrestles with the nature of the universe itself. Is there a divine providence guiding everything, or is the universe merely atoms randomly colliding? He returns to this question multiple times, but his conclusion is always the same: it doesn't matter. Whether the universe is a confusion of atoms or a unified whole under the direction of providence, the question is, do I live in accordance with nature? Do I act justly? If yes, then I have succeeded, regardless of which cosmology is true. This is pragmatic philosophy. Marcus is not interested in elaborate metaphysical speculation. He wants to know, how should I live? What should I do right now? And the answer is always the same: Be virtuous, be kind, accept what comes, control your own mind and responses. The theme of interconnectedness runs throughout meditations. Marcus repeatedly reminds himself that all human beings are connected, part of one cosmic community. We were born to work together like feet, hands, eyelids, like the two rows of teeth, upper and lower. To obstruct each other is against nature. This leads to the ethical principle: what injures the hive injures the bee. You cannot separate your own good from the common good. To harm others is to harm yourself because you are all part of the same whole. This interconnectedness extends even to those who wrong you. When Marcus advises himself on how to deal with difficult people, he returns again and again to the idea that they are kin, fellow rational beings who share in the divine logos. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own. This passage reveals the compassionate core of Marcus's Stoicism. Yes, people will behave badly, but they do so out of ignorance. They do not understand what is truly good. And because they are your kin, you should pity them, not hate them. The best revenge is not to be like that. Instead of responding to evil, respond with patience, with teaching, with virtue. Marcus also grapples with the problem of pain and suffering. As someone who likely suffered from chronic illness and certainly witnessed immense suffering during the plague, he could not ignore this reality. His response is characteristically Stoic. Pain is an event, but suffering is optional. If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself but to your estimate of it, and this you have the power to revoke at any moment. This might seem like cold comfort to someone in physical agony, but Marcus's point is more subtle. He is not denying that pain exists or that it is unpleasant. Rather, he is saying that the mental anguish we add to physical pain, the why me, the this is terrible, the catastrophizing, is within our control. We can experience pain without adding mental suffering to it. This is similar to modern cognitive behavioral therapy's distinction between primary and secondary emotions. On pleasure, Marcus is equally pragmatic. He does not advocate asceticism for its own sake. Rather, he warns against being enslaved by pleasures. Do not let your thinking about pleasures be other than this. Recognize them for what they are. Enjoy them if they come, but do not be disturbed if they do not. This is the Stoic concept of preferred indifference. Pleasure is preferable to pain, but neither is truly good or bad. Only virtue is good, only vice is bad. Marcus frequently reminds himself to maintain perspective on material things. Alexander the Great and his mule driver both died, and the same thing happened to both. They were absorbed into the life force of the universe, or dissolved into atoms. Wealth, power, fame, all these seem important, but in the end they mean nothing. How many who were once celebrated in song are now forgotten? And those who remembered them, where are they? This might sound depressing, but for Marcus, it is freeing. If external things do not truly matter, then you are free. Free from the need to impress others, free from the fear of losing what you have, free to focus on what actually matters: your character, your virtue, your response to events. A particularly poignant theme is Marcus's struggle with his own impatience and anger. He frequently chastises himself for these failures. When you wake up, why not say to yourself, I'll meet people today who talk too much, who are selfish, ungrateful, and dishonest. But I've seen and understood these qualities before. I can't be damaged by them. He is trying to prepare himself, to prevent the frustration he knows he will feel. In one passage he asks himself, why are you bothered when the sweaty neighbor at the baths bumps into you? Why are you disturbed when someone behaves badly at dinner? His answer, because you are expecting too much from imperfect humans. Lower your expectations. Understand that people will behave according to their nature, not according to your wishes. This practical wisdom extends to dealing with frustration. Marcus advises himself to step back when angry, to pause before reacting. The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. And elsewhere, how much more grievous are the consequences of anger than the acts which provoke it? These are not abstract philosophical principles but concrete strategies for managing emotions in real time. Marcus also wrestles with the difficulty of being good when surrounded by corruption. As emperor, he was constantly exposed to sycophants, manipulators, and power seekers. How does one maintain integrity in such an environment? His answer: remember who you are, remember what you value. Live as if you dwelt on a mountain in the wilderness. It makes no difference where you live. Anywhere you live can be the palace of the wise. The internal citadel, the mind, the will, the reasoning faculty, is inviolable if you choose to make it so. No external circumstance can force you to abandon your principles unless you allow it. If someone can prove me wrong and show me my mistake in any thought or action, I shall gladly change. I seek the truth which never harmed anyone. The harm is to persist in one's own self-deception and ignorance. This intellectual humility is paired with moral confidence. Marcus is willing to admit when he is wrong about facts, but he is confident about moral principles. Virtue is always good, vice is always bad, and this is not a matter of opinion but of nature itself. Marcus frequently returns to the theme of social duty. Despite being a Stoic who valued inner peace, he did not withdraw from public life. On the contrary, he saw serving the community as a fundamental human obligation. We were born to work together like feet, hands, and eyes, like the two rows of teeth, upper and lower. To obstruct each other is unnatural. To feel anger at someone, to turn your back on him. These are obstructions. This creates a tension in Marcus's philosophy. On one hand, he seeks tranquility and detachment. On the other hand, he is deeply engaged in the messy, frustrating work of governance. How does he reconcile these? By focusing on intention and effort rather than results. Do what nature demands. Set yourself in motion if you can, and don't look around to see if anyone will know it. Don't hope for Plato's ideal state. Be satisfied with even the smallest progress, and regard the outcome as unimportant. This is practical wisdom for anyone trying to do good in an imperfect world. You cannot control outcomes, but you can control your efforts. You cannot create a perfect society, but you can make small improvements. And that is enough. Marcus also reflects on the brevity of life and the importance of using time wisely. It is not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. And think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly. These are not morbid thoughts but urgent calls to action. You don't know how much time you have. Stop wasting it on trivialities. What are trivialities? Marcus lists them. Worrying about what others think, seeking fame, accumulating wealth, indulging in luxuries. None of these bring true satisfaction. How much time he gains who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only at what he does himself, to make it just and holy. This focus on one's own conduct rather than judging others, is a recurring theme. Marcus constantly reminds himself to mind his own business in the best sense, to work on his own character rather than criticizing others. Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. The role of reason is central to Marcus's philosophy. As a Stoic, he believed that reason is humanity's defining characteristic and most valuable possession. The happiness and unhappiness of the rational social animal depends not on what he feels but on what he does, just as his virtue and vice consist not in feeling but in doing. Emotions are not to be entirely suppressed, but they should not control action. Reason should guide behavior. Marcus also grapples with the relationship between individual will and cosmic determinism. Stoics believed in fate, that everything happens according to the logos, the divine reason that governs the universe. But they also believed in human responsibility. How can both be true? Marcus's solution is to see oneself as a participant in, not a victim of, the cosmic order. Everything harmonizes with me which is harmonious to you, O universe. Nothing for me is too early or too late which is in due season for you. This acceptance of fate, a more fatty love of fate, does not mean passivity. It means aligning your will with the natural order, doing your part cheerfully, accepting outcomes without complaint. Do not let the future trouble you. You will face it, if need be, with the same reason that serves you now in dealing with the present. Marcus also reflects on fame and legacy. As emperor, he was constantly praised and flattered. But he saw through this. All of this hurrying to and fro. For what purpose? And it will be the same with their successors, generation after generation. The same thing, always. How long are you going to wait until you think yourself worthy of the best things and in no matter transgress the distinctions established by reason? He reminds himself that after death, he will be forgotten. Even the greatest emperors are eventually forgotten. So why pursue fame? Why worry about your legacy? Soon you will be ashes or bones, a mere name at most, and even that is just a sound, an echo. The things we pursue in life are empty, stale, trivial. This sounds nihilistic, but Marcus draws a different conclusion. If external things are worthless, then internal things, virtue, character, right action, are everything. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Every obstacle is an opportunity to practice virtue, to demonstrate character. One of the most beautiful passages in Meditations concerns accepting others with all their flaws. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good, and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, not of the same blood or birth but the same mind and possessing a share of the divine. And so none of them can hurt me. No one can implicate me in ugliness, nor can I feel angry at my relative or hate him. We were born to work together. This passage encapsulates the essence of Stoic ethics. Recognize human fallibility, including your own. Understand that wrongdoing comes from ignorance. Remember your common humanity. Refuse to let others' actions corrupt your own character, and maintain compassion despite frustration. Marcus frequently uses vivid images and metaphors to make his points memorable. Life is like a river, constantly flowing. The universe is like a living organism, all parts connected. Your reasoning mind is like a citadel that cannot be conquered unless you allow it. These images make abstract philosophy concrete and memorable. He also uses thought experiments. Imagine that you could see the entire span of human history at once, from the beginning to the end. Would you see anything new? No, the same patterns repeating: birth, growth, conflict, death. Generations come and go, but human nature remains constant. This helps maintain perspective when dealing with current troubles. Whatever you are facing, countless others have faced before and will face again. Marcus grapples honestly with the difficulty of philosophy in practice. He does not pretend it is easy to be a Stoic. He acknowledges his own failures, his moments of weakness. In one passage he seems to be giving himself a pep talk. At dawn, when you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work, as a human being. What do I have to complain of, if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do? Or is this what I was created for? To huddle under the blankets and stay warm. This glimpse of Marcus struggling to get out of bed, just like anyone else, makes him relatable across the centuries. Philosophy is not just for perfect sages but for struggling humans trying to do better. The question of divine providence versus materialism recurs throughout Meditations. Sometimes Marcus writes as if he believes in a benevolent guiding intelligence. Other times he considers the possibility that the universe is just atoms and void, with no deeper meaning. But he always concludes that it makes no practical difference. Either way, your task is the same. Live virtuously, treat others well, accept what comes, control your own mind. Marcus also reflects on change and impermanence. Everything is constantly transforming into something else. What we call death is just another transformation. That which has died does not fall outside the universe. Here it remains, and here it changes, and is dissolved into its elements, which are elements of the universe and of yourself. And they too change without complaint. This naturalistic view of death is meant to remove its sting. You are not losing yourself. You are being reabsorbed into the cosmos from which you came. It is as natural as digestion or breathing. Why fear it? On pleasure and pain, Marcus takes a characteristically Stoic view. They are neither good nor bad in themselves. What matters is how you respond to them. Pain is neither unbearable nor unending, if you remember its limits and don't magnify them in your imagination. And pleasure is evil because it enslaves you. Pain is neither good nor bad, it is simply something that happens. This might seem harsh, but Marcus is trying to free himself and any reader from the tyranny of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain at all costs. These sensations come and go. Chasing after them leads to slavery. Inner freedom comes from not being controlled by them. Marcus also writes movingly about the interconnectedness of all things. When he looks at a loaf of bread, he sees the wheat, the baker, the farmers, the rain and sun that made the wheat grow. Everything is connected to everything else in an unbreakable web of causation and interdependence. Recognizing this should make us humble and grateful. The passages on gratitude are particularly striking. Despite all the hardships Marcus faced, plague, war, betrayal, the deaths of children, he maintains gratitude for what he has. In Book 1 he thanks all the people who shaped him. Elsewhere, he thanks the universe itself for his existence, his ability to reason, his capacity for virtue. This gratitude is not naive or forced. It is a deliberate choice to focus on what is good rather than what is lacking. Marcus frequently returns to the theme of self-sufficiency. Not in the sense of material self-sufficiency, but psychological and moral self-sufficiency. Your worth does not depend on external circumstances. If you are distressed by any external thing, it is not the thing itself that troubles you, but your own judgment about it. And this you have the power to eliminate now. This radical claim, that we can eliminate our distress by changing our judgments, is at the heart of Stoic therapy. It influenced cognitive behavioral therapy centuries later. The idea is not to deny that bad things happen, but to recognize that our interpretation of events, not the events themselves, causes most of our suffering. On dealing with criticism and insults, Marcus advises detachment. If the criticism is true, why be upset? You should be grateful for the feedback. If it is false, why care what an ignorant person thinks? Either way, there is no reason for anger. This is easier said than done, which is why Marcus reminds himself of it repeatedly. The theme of morning preparation recurs several times. Marcus developed a practice of preparing himself mentally for the day ahead. He would remind himself that he would encounter difficult people, that things would not go as planned, that patience and understanding would be required. This mental rehearsal was meant to prevent reactive anger when these predictable events occurred. Marcus also practices negative visualization, imagining the loss of what he values. This Stoic technique is meant not to be depressing but to increase appreciation and reduce the shock if loss occurs. Do not indulge in dreams of having what you have not, but reckon up the chief of the blessings you do possess, and then thankfully remember how you would crave for them if they were not yours. The philosophical concept of preferred indifference appears throughout meditations. Health, wealth, reputation, these are preferable to their opposites, but they are not truly good. Only virtue is truly good, only vice truly bad. This distinction is crucial to Stoic philosophy. It allows you to work for worldly success without being enslaved by it, to enjoy comfort without depending on it for happiness. Marcus grapples with the problem of evil. How can bad things happen in a universe governed by divine providence? His answer varies. Sometimes he suggests that what seems bad to us may serve a larger purpose we cannot see. Other times he admits he does not know why bad things happen but insists that our response to them is what matters. And sometimes he considers that perhaps there is no providence, just nature. But even then, our task is to live according to our own nature as rational beings. On anger specifically, Marcus has much to say. He recognizes it as his own particular weakness and works hard to control it. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. And how much more harmful are the consequences of anger than the circumstances that aroused it? He tries to catch himself before anger takes hold, to pause and consider whether the provocation truly matters in the grand scheme of things. Usually it does not. The theme of living as if each day were your last appears multiple times. Think of yourself as dead. You have lived your life. Now take what's left and live it properly. This is not meant to be morbid but motivating. If today were your last day, would you waste it on trivialities? Would you be cruel, selfish, petty? Of course not. So why do these things when you might have years left? Marcus also reflects on the paradox of imperial power. He is the most powerful man in the world, yet he is ultimately powerless to control most things. He cannot control the weather, cannot prevent people from being foolish, cannot stop disease or death. All he can truly control is his own character and responses. This recognition keeps him humble despite his exalted position. The passages on simplicity are beautiful. Very little is needed to make a happy life. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. Material possessions and external circumstances contribute far less to happiness than we imagine. Inner peace, virtue, meaningful work, these are what matter, and these are available to anyone who cultivates them. Marcus frequently reminds himself to focus on the present moment. Not to dwell on past regrets or future anxieties, but to be fully present now. Confine yourself to the present. This is ancient mindfulness practice. The past cannot be changed, the future is uncertain, but the present moment is where you actually live and where you can act. One of the most famous passages concerns obstacles. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. This has been translated and interpreted many ways, but the essence is that obstacles are opportunities to practice virtue. You cannot show courage without danger, cannot show patience without frustration, cannot show forgiveness without being wronged. So obstacles are not merely to be endured but to be welcomed as opportunities for character development. Marcus also writes about the importance of role models. In Book 1 he lists all the people he learned from. Throughout Meditations he refers to historical figures, Socrates, Epictetus, Antoninus, as examples to emulate. He is constantly asking himself, what would Epictetus do? How would Antoninus handle this? This practice of imaginatively consulting one's role models is a powerful technique for ethical decision-making. The concept of living according to nature appears throughout Meditations. But what does this mean? For Marcus, human nature is to be rational and social. Therefore, living according to nature means using reason to guide your actions and contributing to the human community. Anything that violates reason or harms community is unnatural, even if it is common human behavior. Marcus grapples with the fact that good people often suffer while bad people prosper. His response is that external success and failure are not what matter. The good person who suffers is still good. That virtue is untouchable by external circumstances. The bad person who prospers is still bad. Their wealth does not make them virtuous. The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane. The meditation on cosmic perspective is one of meditation's most powerful tools. Whenever Marcus feels overwhelmed by problems, he zooms out. He imagines viewing Earth from space, seeing all of human history at once, contemplating the infinite past and future. From this perspective, today's problems shrink to their proper size, significant enough to deal with, but not worth excessive distress. Marcus also reflects on the brief span of fame. Even the most famous emperors are eventually forgotten. Their names might endure for a few generations, but eventually they fade into obscurity. So why pursue fame? Why worry about your reputation? Soon you will be ashes or bones, a mere name at most, and even that is just a sound, an echo. This is not nihilism but realism, meant to redirect effort from the futile pursuit of external validation to the worthy pursuit of internal virtue. The passages on death are particularly poignant given that Marcus was writing them while dealing with plague and war. Death was not an abstract concept but an immediate reality. Friends, family, soldiers, thousands were dying around him. His meditation on death was not philosophical speculation but a necessary coping mechanism and a way to maintain perspective. One striking passage imagines death as a natural process, like the cornfield in autumn. First this blade breaks, then that. What is it to die? See what dying is by looking at it separately, that which our imagination represents to us. Is it one thing and not that which nature requires? If you are doing the work of a man, what is there terrible in it? For how can you not do the work of a man except by doing it badly? Marcus uses numerous metaphors to make his philosophy concrete. Life is a play and we are actors. We don't choose our roles but we can perform them well or poorly. Life is like being at a festival. Enjoy it while it lasts but don't be upset when it ends. The universe is like a river, constantly flowing and changing. These vivid images help make abstract Stoic philosophy memorable and applicable. The practice of reserving judgment appears throughout meditations. Do not immediately label things as good or bad. What seems disastrous might lead to something beneficial. What seems fortunate might lead to ruin. Therefore, suspend judgment and simply deal with what is before you. Everything is only for a day, both that which remembers and that which is remembered. Marcus also reflects on the comedy of human striving. People rush around, pursuing wealth and power, thinking these things matter. But from the cosmic perspective, it is all absurdly insignificant. This does not mean we should do nothing but that we should maintain perspective. Do your work, fulfill your duties, but don't take yourself too seriously. One of the most practical sections concerns managing impressions. When something happens, there is the raw event, and then there is your interpretation of it. Stoicism teaches distinguishing between these. The event cannot harm you unless you judge it as harmful. Choose not to be harmed and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed and you haven't been. This is not denying reality but recognizing the power of interpretation. Marcus wrestles with the difficulty of maintaining equanimity when surrounded by chaos. As emperor during plague and war, he was constantly dealing with crises. His strategy: remember that you can only control your response. The plague will take its course, the barbarians will attack, but you can choose to respond with wisdom, courage, and justice rather than panic and despair. The theme of time's preciousness recurs. It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste a lot of it. Life is long enough, and a sufficiently generous amount has been given to us for the highest achievements if it were all well invested. This is a critique of how people waste time on trivialities, gossip, worry, anger, pleasure-seeking, rather than on what matters. Marcus also reflects on the equality of all humans. Despite being emperor, he sees himself as fundamentally equal to the lowliest slave. All possess reason, all participate in the divine logos. This democratic spirituality was radical for its time and remains powerful today. The universe is transformation, life is opinion. External circumstances differ, but the capacity for virtue is universal. Near the end of Meditations, Marcus returns to his central themes with new urgency. Time is running out. Death approaches. What matters? Do what nature demands. Set yourself in motion if you can. Don't look round to see if anyone will know. Don't expect Plato's ideal state. Be content with even the smallest progress, and regard the outcome as unimportant. This acceptance of imperfection, both in oneself and in the world, is perhaps the most valuable lesson in meditations. You will not become a perfect Stoic sage. Society will not become perfect. But you can make small improvements, and that is enough. Progress, not perfection, is the goal. The final passages have a valedictory quality. Marcus seems to be preparing himself for death, which came shortly after he finished writing. You have endured infinite troubles through not being content with your directing mind. Enough now. Death is not to be feared or welcomed, simply accepted as the natural end of life's journey. As you close your eyes tonight, remember Marcus's words. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, I am here to do the work of a human being. The work I was designed to do. Or is this what I was created for? To huddle under the blankets and stay warm? Each day is a gift, an opportunity to practice virtue, to help others, to align yourself with nature's demands. Marcus Aurelius lived 2,000 years ago, but his struggle is ours. How to be good in a difficult world. How to maintain integrity when compromises beckon. How to accept loss and disappointment without becoming bitter. How to keep trying even when success seems impossible. The beauty of meditations is that Marcus offers no easy answers, no quick fixes. Just honest wrestling with life's challenges, just persistent effort to do better, just humble acceptance of human limitations. And somehow, across 2 millennia, that is exactly what still speaks to us. Sleep well, knowing that the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, hard-won through suffering, tested in the crucible of absolute power, refined through years of philosophical practice, remains available to guide you. His empire fell. His sun failed. But his words endure, as relevant today as when he first penned them by candlelight in a military camp on the Danube frontier. Good night. May your rest be peaceful, your dreams serene, and when morning comes, may you rise ready to do the work of a human being with courage, wisdom, justice, and self-control. As Marcus himself would say, this alone is enough. Having explored the philosophical core of meditations, let us now turn to Marcus's personal tragedies and how his Stoic philosophy helped, or failed to help, him cope with profound loss. For Marcus's life was not merely a series of philosophical meditations. It was marked by devastating personal losses that would break most people. The deaths of children were perhaps Marcus's greatest sorrows. Of the 13 or 14 children born to Marcus and Faustina, only a handful survived to adulthood. Exact numbers are disputed by historians, but what is certain is that Marcus endured the death of multiple children, some as infants, others as young children who had begun to develop personalities and relationships. The loss of young children was tragically common in ancient Rome. Even imperial families with access to the best physicians and nutrition could not escape the high infant mortality rate. But common does not mean bearable. Each death must have been a knife to Marcus's heart. How did a Stoic emperor, trained to accept fate and control his responses, deal with watching his children die? Meditations offers only oblique hints. Marcus does not explicitly discuss his children's deaths, which suggests he considered such grief too personal even for his private journal. But certain passages take on new meaning when read with this context. When Marcus writes, "Loss is nothing else but change, and change is nature's delight," we can imagine him trying to steel himself against the pain of losing a child. When he writes, "Everything is ephemeral, both the rememberer and the remembered," we can hear a father trying to find cosmic perspective on the death of his child. When he says, "Accept whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny, for what could more aptly fit your needs?" we can sense a man desperately trying to make sense of senseless tragedy through philosophical framework. The Stoic response to grief was complex. Stoics did not deny the naturalness of initial grief. They recognized that the first shock of loss produces involuntary reactions. Tears, pain, a sense of emptiness. What Stoicism opposed was prolonged grief, excessive mourning, the kind of emotional indulgence that prevents you from continuing to live and function. The goal was not to eliminate feeling but to process it and move forward. Marcus would have applied this framework to his own losses. Allow yourself to feel the pain but do not let it consume you. Accept that death is natural, that children sometimes die before their parents, that this is part of the natural order however horrible it seems. Then return to duty. Return to service. Return to virtue. The work of being human continues even in the midst of grief. But how successful was Marcus in actually doing this? We cannot know for certain. His public persona remained controlled and dignified. Ancient sources do not record him breaking down or neglecting his duties due to grief. But what happened in private? What tears were shed away from public view? What anguished questions were asked in the dark of night? The death of Faustina added another layer of loss. She died in 175, probably in her mid-40s. The circumstances are murky. Some sources suggest gout, others hint at suicide. The rumor that she killed herself because of her involvement in Cassius's rebellion is probably false, a piece of hostile propaganda. But the uncertainty itself is telling. Even about the death of the empress, wife of the emperor, mother of his children, accurate information was hard to obtain. Marcus's response to Faustina's death was to honor her memory lavishly. He had temples built for her, cities renamed for her, coins struck with her image. Cynics might interpret this as mere political theater, maintaining the appearance of a devoted husband regardless of private feelings. But Marcus was not known for political theater. More likely, these honors represented genuine grief and love. There were, of course, rumors about Faustina's fidelity during Marcus's long absences on military campaigns. Ancient sources record gossip about affairs with sailors and gladiators. How much of this was true and how much was the standard slander that attached itself to any powerful woman is impossible to say. What we do know is that Marcus defended her reputation both during her life and after her death. In Meditations, Marcus does not discuss his marriage directly. This silence might indicate that he considered his relationship with Faustina too private for even his personal journal. Or it might suggest that he compartmentalized his role as philosopher from his role as husband. But in Book 1, when listing what he is grateful for, he mentions being granted a wife so obedient, so loving, so simple. Whether this refers to Faustina or is a more general philosophical reflection on marriage, the warmth comes through. The contrast between Marcus and Commodus haunted Marcus's final years. Here was a son who rejected everything his father stood for. Commodus showed no interest in philosophy, no dedication to duty, no commitment to justice. Instead, he was vain, cruel, self-indulgent, and unstable. Ancient sources describe him fighting as a gladiator, dressing as Hercules, renaming months of the year after his various titles, and eventually declaring himself a god. How did Marcus feel watching this son, the only male child to survive to adulthood, show such contempt for the values Marcus held dear? The silence in Meditations about Commodus is deafening. In a work where Marcus expresses gratitude to dozens of people who influenced him, Commodus is never mentioned. Not once does Marcus write, "I am grateful to my son for." This omission speaks volumes. Some historians speculate that Marcus knew Commodus was unfit but felt bound by blood to make him heir anyway. Others suggest Marcus was in denial, hoping Commodus would mature and improve. Still others argue that Marcus had no viable alternative. Civil war would have erupted if he tried to bypass his biological son in favor of an adopted heir. Whatever the reason, the decision to make Commodus emperor was arguably Marcus's greatest failure, one that undid much of his good work as emperor. The irony is profound. The 5 good emperors before Marcus, Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus himself, had established a pattern of adoptive succession based on merit. Each emperor adopted the most qualified person to succeed him, creating a century of remarkably stable and effective leadership. Marcus broke this pattern by making his biological son emperor, and the result was catastrophic. Did Marcus regret this decision? Again, Meditations offers no direct answer. But certain passages about accepting what cannot be changed and finding meaning in doing one's duty despite uncertain outcomes might be read as Marcus wrestling with this issue. Do what nature demands appears repeatedly in Meditations. Perhaps making Commodus emperor was what nature demanded. Commodus was his son, and Roman fathers were expected to provide for their sons. Perhaps Marcus tried to convince himself that this was the right choice even as he harbored doubts. The broader question of parenting appears only rarely in Meditations, which is surprising given that Marcus was father to many children. This suggests that he found the topic too painful, too fraught, too resistant to philosophical resolution. Stoicism offers guidance for dealing with external circumstances beyond your control, but what about when the source of frustration is your own child? You cannot simply accept a child's failings as you might accept bad weather or death. Marcus did try to shape Commodus, bringing him along on military campaigns, exposing him to governance, providing him with excellent tutors. But Commodus resisted. He wanted to return to Rome, to the games and luxuries of the capital. The austere military life held no appeal for him. Watching his son reject the values he tried to instill must have been agonizing for Marcus. Yet Marcus could not force Commodus to become a Stoic philosopher or a dedicated emperor. Each person's character is their own. Stoicism teaches that you can control your own judgments and actions, but you cannot control others, not even your children. This must have been a bitter pill for Marcus to swallow. The plague that devastated the empire during Marcus's reign created another set of personal challenges for the philosopher-emperor. The Antonine Plague killed millions and disrupted society completely. How does a Stoic emperor respond to mass death? How does one maintain equanimity in the face of apocalyptic suffering? Marcus's response was characteristically Stoic but not inhumane. He took practical measures, organizing medical care, distributing food, maintaining order, while philosophically accepting that death was natural and inevitable. In Meditations he writes frequently about death, not morbidly but as a fundamental fact of existence. You have endured infinite troubles through not being content with your directing mind, enough now. The plague forced Marcus to confront the fragility of civilization. Roman society, which seemed so permanent and powerful, was revealed to be vulnerable to invisible forces it could neither understand nor control. The plague did not care about military might or imperial authority. It killed indiscriminately. This must have reinforced Marcus's Stoic conviction that external circumstances are ultimately beyond human control. There is something almost modern in Marcus's situation. Like leaders facing pandemic today, he had to make decisions with incomplete information, balance public health against economic concerns, manage public panic, and continue governing even as the crisis ground on year after year. The plague lasted for most of his reign, a constant background of death and fear against which all other activities played out. How did Marcus avoid despair? Partly through philosophical practice. The daily discipline of meditations, the constant reminders of Stoic principles, the mental exercises of accepting fate and maintaining perspective, all of these helped him endure. But also through duty. He had work to do. An empire to govern. Armies to lead. Problems to solve. Focusing on these duties provided structure and meaning even in the midst of catastrophe. The wars on the Danube frontier consumed the final decade of Marcus's life. These were not glorious conquests but desperate defensive struggles against waves of barbarian invasions. Marcus spent year after year in military camps, enduring harsh winters, dealing with constant danger, making difficult strategic decisions. For a philosopher who valued tranquility and contemplation, this must have been a special kind of hell. Yet it was during these military campaigns that Marcus did some of his deepest philosophical writing. The contrast is striking. A Roman emperor, the most powerful man in the world, sitting in a tent on the frontier, surrounded by war and death, writing about the importance of inner peace and acceptance of fate. The harsh external circumstances seem to have intensified his philosophical practice rather than undermined it. Marcus's military leadership during these wars showed a different side of his character. He was not merely a philosopher but a capable general and administrator. He made strategic decisions, managed logistics, negotiated with barbarian leaders, and led his armies in person despite his age and poor health. The conventional portrait of Marcus as a reluctant warrior who would have preferred to stay in Rome reading philosophy is too simple. The truth is more complex. Marcus was indeed a philosopher who valued peace and learning, but he was also an emperor who understood his duty. When war was necessary, he prosecuted it effectively. When personal comfort conflicted with duty, he chose duty. This integration of philosophical contemplation and active engagement with the world is what makes Marcus's example so compelling. The famous miracle of the rain incident during the Marcomannic Wars illustrates the mixture of philosophy, pragmatism, and propaganda that characterized Marcus's reign. During a battle with the Quadi, a Roman legion was surrounded and dying of thirst. Suddenly, a rainstorm erupted, saving the soldiers. Different groups claimed credit. Pagans said the gods favored Marcus. Christians said their prayers were answered. Others suggested it was simply fortuitous weather. Marcus's own interpretation is not recorded, but given his stoicism, he probably saw it as a natural event that happened to occur at an opportune moment. Stoics did not deny the existence of gods but understood divine providence in naturalistic terms. The rain fell because meteorological conditions produced it, and those conditions were part of the ordered cosmos. Whether this was miraculous or merely fortunate was a matter of interpretation. The column of Marcus Aurelius in Rome, which still stands today, depicts scenes from the Marcomannic Wars. Looking at these relief sculptures, we see a different Marcus from the one in Meditations. Here he is portrayed as a triumphant military commander, receiving the submission of defeated barbarians, addressing his troops, overseeing the execution of enemies. This is Marcus the Emperor, Marcus the warrior. But both images, the philosopher writing in his tent and the commander leading armies, are authentic. Marcus contained multitudes. His final campaign in 179 to 180 brought Marcus close to achieving his strategic goal, the creation of two new provinces, Marcomannia and Sarmatia, which would push the frontier beyond the Danube and provide a more defensible border. Roman armies were wintering on the far side of the Danube, Roman fortifications were being built in barbarian territory, the enemy tribes were weakened and ready to submit. Victory seemed within reach. But Marcus died before he could complete the conquest. On March 17, 180, at Vindobona, modern Vienna, or possibly Sirmium, Marcus Aurelius died at age 58. The exact cause of death is debated: plague, another illness, simply the accumulated toll of years of stress and hardship. His last days were spent with his closest advisors, arranging the succession, ensuring that Commodus would be accepted as emperor. According to ancient sources, Marcus refused food for several days before his death, perhaps deliberately hastening the end. If true, this suggests that he knew his time had come and chose to accept it on his own terms rather than lingering in weakness. Whether this constitutes a form of Stoic suicide is debatable. Stoics generally opposed suicide except in extreme circumstances, but they also believed in accepting death when it was inevitable. His final words, as reported by Cassius Dio, concern duty: "Go to the rising sun, for I am already setting." This phrase captures Marcus's character. Even at the moment of death, he was thinking about the empire's needs, directing attention away from himself to the ongoing work. Another version of his last words has him telling his friends not to weep for him but to think about the plague and about mortality in general. Again, the philosopher maintaining perspective even in extremis. Marcus's body was cremated, and his ashes were placed in Hadrian's mausoleum in Rome, now known as Castel Sant'Angelo. He was immediately deified by the Senate, joining the ranks of divine emperors. Temples were built, sacrifices offered, his birthday celebrated as a public holiday. But these honors, which would have seemed so important to most men, were exactly the kind of posthumous fame that Marcus himself dismissed as empty in Meditations. The reign of Commodus that followed vindicated all of Marcus's worst fears. Commodus immediately made peace with the Germanic tribes, abandoning Marcus's strategic goals and returning to Rome. His reign was marked by incompetence, cruelty, megalomania, and ultimate descent into madness. He fought as a gladiator in the Colosseum, declared himself the reincarnation of Hercules, renamed Rome after himself, and was finally assassinated in 192 after 12 years of misrule. Commodus's reign is often cited as the beginning of Rome's decline, the end of the Pax Romana, the transition from the empire's height to its gradual disintegration. This makes Marcus's failure to prevent Commodus's succession all the more significant. One bad succession decision undid a century of good governance and set Rome on a path toward crisis. Yet to judge Marcus solely on this failure seems unfair. He inherited an empire at peace and left it under assault. He inherited a healthy population and lived through a plague that killed millions. He inherited a full treasury and had to fund decades of warfare. He inherited the Stoic philosophical tradition and enriched it with his own contributions. He tried to be a good emperor, a good man, and a good Stoic. That he failed in some ways does not negate his achievements in others. The survival and transmission of Meditations is itself something of a miracle. Marcus wrote for himself, not for publication. The work could easily have been lost, destroyed, or simply forgotten. But somehow it survived the chaos following Marcus's death, the tumultuous 3rd century, the fall of the Western Empire, the Middle Ages. It survived because people kept copying it, because they found value in it, because Marcus's words spoke to them across the centuries. We do not know exactly how Meditations was preserved. The earliest certain reference is from the 10th century, which means 700 years of transmission about which we know almost nothing. The work was probably kept in imperial archives, then in Byzantine libraries. Monks copied it, scholars studied it, it slowly spread from Greek into other languages. By the time Meditations reached Western Europe during the Renaissance, it was already ancient. The first printed edition appeared in 1558, more than 1300 years after Marcus's death. From then on, the work's popularity grew steadily. It spoke to Renaissance humanists seeking models of virtuous leadership. It spoke to Enlightenment philosophers interested in reason and natural law. It spoke to Victorian moralists concerned with duty and character. And it continues to speak to readers today. What accounts for this enduring appeal? Partly it is the personality behind the words. We read Meditations knowing that Marcus was emperor of Rome, that he held absolute power, that he commanded armies and governed millions. Yet here he is wrestling with the same problems we all face. How to be patient with difficult people, how to get up in the morning when you don't feel like it, how to accept disappointment, how to find meaning in routine duties. This combination of vast power and humble struggle is compelling. But the appeal goes deeper than personality. Meditations offers a coherent philosophical framework for living. Not a dogmatic system that requires believing unprovable claims, but a practical approach to everyday life grounded in reason and nature. Don't worry about what you can't control. Focus on being virtuous. Treat others with compassion. Accept mortality. Find meaning in the present moment. These principles are simple, but applying them consistently is difficult, which is why Marcus returns to them again and again. The influence of meditations on later thought is hard to quantify but clearly substantial. The work has been translated into dozens of languages and remains continuously in print. It has influenced philosophers, writers, politicians, and generals. It has been carried into battle, quoted in speeches, adapted for self-help books, and cited in academic papers. The Stoic revival of recent decades owes much to renewed interest in Marcus's writings. Modern Stoicism, as practiced by thousands of people today through books, online forums, and annual Stoic Week events, draws heavily on meditations. The practical exercises Marcus describes, morning meditation, negative visualization, contemplation of death, analysis of emotions, have been adapted for contemporary use. Cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the most effective forms of modern psychotherapy, has explicitly acknowledged its debt to Stoic philosophy and particularly to ideas found in meditations. Business leaders cite Marcus's writings on leadership and decision-making. Athletes use his teachings on mental resilience and responding to obstacles. Politicians invoke his example of duty and service. Students read him for guidance on managing stress and maintaining focus. The breadth of appeal suggests that Marcus touched on something universal about the human condition. Of course, not everything in meditations translates perfectly to modern life. Marcus was a product of his time, with assumptions about slavery, women's roles, and imperial power that we no longer share. His Stoic philosophy sometimes seems cold, too ready to accept suffering that could be ameliorated. His emphasis on duty can sound oppressive to modern ears that value individual fulfillment. These limitations should not be ignored. But the core insights remain valuable. The distinction between what we can control and what we cannot control is as relevant now as in ancient Rome. The importance of examining our own judgments and assumptions before reacting to events applies as much to social media as to imperial court intrigue. The practice of maintaining perspective by considering the vastness of time and space works just as well for modern anxieties as for ancient ones. The personal dimension of meditations makes it unique among philosophical texts. We are not reading a systematic treatise written to convince others, but a private journal written to guide oneself. This intimacy creates a different kind of relationship between text and reader. We are not being lectured to but allowed to overhear someone thinking through problems, reminding himself of principles, trying to be better than he is. This honest admission of imperfection is perhaps meditation's greatest strength. Marcus does not present himself as a sage who has achieved perfect Stoic wisdom. He presents himself as a struggling student still learning, still failing, still trying again. This makes him more relatable and more inspiring than any perfect example could be. We see that even the Emperor of Rome had to work on patience, had to fight against anger, had to remind himself daily of basic principles. If Marcus needed constant practice, how much more do we? The practical nature of Marcus's philosophy is another key to its enduring appeal. Abstract metaphysical speculation appears rarely in meditations. Instead, we get concrete advice for specific situations. How to deal with difficult people. How to maintain focus amid distractions. How to find motivation when you feel discouraged. How to accept setbacks without giving up. These are practical problems that everyone faces, and Marcus offers practical solutions. His solutions are not always easy, of course. Accepting death is hard. Treating cruel people with compassion is hard. Maintaining equanimity when everything is going wrong is hard. Marcus does not pretend otherwise. But he argues that these difficult things are possible, and that the effort to achieve them is worthwhile even if perfect success eludes us. The role of writing itself in Marcus's philosophical practice is significant. The act of writing forces you to clarify your thoughts, to make them concrete and explicit. By writing down his philosophical reflections, Marcus was not just recording them but actively shaping his own mind. This is why the repetition in meditations is not a flaw but a feature. Marcus needed to write the same ideas multiple times because each writing was a fresh exercise, a renewal of commitment, a reminder to his future self. This aspect of meditations has inspired the modern practice of journaling as a tool for self-improvement and mental health. Writing about your day, your goals, your challenges, your values, this is precisely what Marcus was doing. Meditations demonstrates that this practice has been valuable for at least 2,000 years and likely will remain so. The question of audience is intriguing. Marcus wrote for himself, but did he truly expect no one else would ever read his words? It seems unlikely that the emperor would be careless enough to leave private writings unprotected. Perhaps he expected that after his death, his journals might be read by family or advisors. Perhaps he thought they might serve as guidance for Commodus, though given Commodus's character, this seems optimistic. Or perhaps Marcus genuinely wrote only for himself, using writing as a tool for thought without concern for future readers. Whatever his intention, the result is that we have unprecedented access to the private thoughts of a Roman emperor. No other emperor left such a personal record. We have public speeches, official letters, administrative documents from various emperors, but nothing like the intimate self-examination of meditations. This makes the work invaluable not only as philosophy but as history, giving us insight into how one extraordinary person experienced and thought about his life. The Stoic tradition that Marcus inherited was already ancient by his time. Stoicism began in Athens around 300 BCE, founded by Zeno of Citium. By Marcus's era, it had evolved over nearly 5 centuries, producing numerous teachers and texts. The Stoicism Marcus practiced was different from the original Stoic philosophy, more focused on practical ethics, less concerned with logic and physics. This Roman Stoicism, as represented by Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus himself, is what survived and influenced later thought. Marcus's unique contribution to Stoicism was not theoretical innovation but practical demonstration. He showed what it looks like to try to live as a Stoic while holding enormous power and facing enormous challenges. Earlier Stoics had been teachers, writers, or at most advisors to the powerful. Marcus actually was the powerful, and his attempt to use that power ethically while maintaining philosophical principles provides a unique case study. The tension between power and philosophy is a constant undercurrent in meditations. How do you maintain humility when everyone flatters you? How do you stay focused on virtue when you can have anything you want? How do you treat all people equally when vast hierarchies of status surround you? Marcus wrestles with these questions, sometimes successfully, sometimes not. His solution generally is to remind himself constantly that external things do not matter. Imperial power is not truly good, only virtue is good. Being emperor does not make him better than anyone else, it just gives him different duties. Fame and flattery are empty. What matters is whether his actions are just and his thoughts rational. By mentally stripping away the trappings of power, Marcus tried to see himself clearly as simply a human being trying to live well. This relates to another key Stoic concept that appears throughout meditations, the idea of cosmopolitanism, of being a citizen of the world. Marcus repeatedly reminds himself that he is not just a Roman, not just an emperor, but a member of the human community and indeed of the cosmic community of all rational beings. This perspective was meant to counteract provincial thinking and remind him that all people deserve consideration and respect. Modern readers sometimes criticize Stoicism generally and Marcus specifically for seeming to accept unjust social structures. If everyone is equally capable of virtue regardless of external circumstances, then why work to improve external circumstances? Why free slaves if they can be virtuous in slavery? Why help the poor if poverty does not truly harm them? This critique has some force, but it oversimplifies Stoic ethics. Stoics did believe that virtue was the only true good and that external circumstances were indifferent. But this did not mean they thought all external circumstances were equally preferable or that there was no reason to prefer some over others. Health is preferable to disease, freedom to slavery, wealth to poverty. These are preferred indifferents. Stoics could and did work to achieve preferable outcomes while maintaining that their virtue did not depend on success. Marcus's own actions as emperor demonstrate this. He worked to improve legal justice, to help the poor, to provide disaster relief during the plague. These actions show that he cared about external circumstances even while philosophically maintaining that they were not ultimately what mattered. The Stoic framework allowed him to work hard for good outcomes without being devastated when those outcomes did not materialize. The question of Stoicism and emotion deserves attention. Popular understanding often portrays Stoics as unemotional, seeking to eliminate feelings. But this is a misunderstanding. Stoics distinguished between initial feelings, which are involuntary and natural, and judgments about those feelings, which are voluntary and subject to reason. You cannot prevent feeling grief when a loved one dies, but you can prevent that grief from turning into the prolonged, excessive mourning that Stoics called a passion. Marcus experienced emotions. We can see this in Meditations. He felt frustrated with difficult people, weary of his duties, saddened by loss. But he tried not to let these feelings control his actions or distort his judgment. This is a subtle but important distinction. Stoicism is not about becoming unfeeling but about not being controlled by feelings. The Stoic concept of living according to nature is central to Meditations but requires explanation. Nature here does not mean wilderness or instinct. It means the essential nature of the universe and of human beings as part of that universe. For Stoics, the universe is rationally ordered, and human beings are rational animals whose nature is to use reason and to live in community. Therefore, living according to nature means living rationally and socially, using your reason to contribute to the common good. This explains Marcus's emphasis on duty and service. It was not mere conscientiousness or inability to relax. He genuinely believed that serving the empire was part of fulfilling his nature as a human being. Refusing this duty would be like a tree refusing to grow or a bird refusing to fly, a violation of essential nature. Whether this belief made his burden easier to bear or harder is debatable. The writing style of Meditations reflects its private, informal character. The Greek is not particularly polished or literary. Marcus sometimes leaves thoughts incomplete, uses informal constructions, and relies on shorthand that made sense to him but can puzzle later readers. This rough quality is part of the work's appeal. We are reading raw thoughts, not carefully crafted prose. This immediacy creates a sense of direct contact with Marcus's mind. Translating Meditations presents unique challenges. The work's informal nature means there are ambiguities about exactly what Marcus meant. His frequent use of Stoic technical terms requires translators to make choices about how to render concepts that do not have exact modern equivalents. Different translations of the same passage can vary significantly, which is why readers are often encouraged to read multiple translations or to learn Greek and read the original. The question of Marcus's religious beliefs based on Meditations is complex. He refers to gods frequently, following conventional polytheistic language, but his philosophical conception seems closer to pantheism or even something like deism. The divine is identified with nature, with the logos or reason that governs the universe. Whether Marcus literally believed in Zeus, Apollo, and the traditional gods or merely used them as poetic personifications of natural forces is unclear. What is clear is that Marcus saw the universe as ordered and meaningful, not random and chaotic. Whether this order came from personal gods or from impersonal nature mattered less than recognizing and aligning oneself with it. This flexible theology allowed Stoicism to appeal to people with different religious views, which partly explains its enduring influence. Looking at Marcus's legacy overall, we see contradictions and complexities. He was a successful emperor in many ways, maintaining relative stability during crises, governing justly, respecting the Senate, living modestly despite vast wealth. But he also left Rome weaker than he found it, depleted by plague and constant warfare. He was a devoted father who raised a monster for a son. He was a philosopher who spent most of his reign in military camps. He preached acceptance and equanimity while feeling frustrated and weary. These contradictions make him human and relatable. Perfect exemplars of virtue exist only in imagination. Real people struggle, fail, try again, partially succeed, face dilemmas with no good answers. Marcus's example is valuable precisely because it is imperfect. We see someone trying to be good in difficult circumstances and not entirely succeeding. This is the human condition. The fate of Rome after Marcus's death reinforces certain Stoic insights. All empires fall, all glory fades, all human achievements are temporary. The mighty Roman Empire that seemed eternal eventually collapsed. The proud city of Rome that ruled the world was sacked by barbarians. The sophisticated culture of antiquity was largely lost. Stoicism teaches us to expect this, to not be surprised when powerful institutions prove fragile, when civilizations decline, when everything changes. Yet Marcus's words survived. The material empire fell, but the philosophical legacy endures. This seems fitting for a Stoic emperor. External achievements, territory conquered, buildings erected, wealth accumulated, all prove transient. But thoughts, principles, wisdom, these can last millennia if people find them valuable enough to preserve and transmit. The personal cost of Marcus's devotion to duty is worth considering. He gave his life to serving Rome. He spent years in uncomfortable military camps far from home. He dealt with constant problems and crises. He endured personal tragedies. He never pursued his own pleasure or comfort. Was it worth it? Did his sacrifice actually benefit Rome, or might a different emperor have achieved similar or better results with less personal cost? These questions have no clear answers, but they highlight a potential tension in Stoic philosophy between duty and well-being. Stoics believed that virtue is sufficient for happiness, that external circumstances do not truly affect it. But is this actually true? Can someone be happy while constantly stressed, grieving multiple children, watching their empire struggle, knowing their son will destroy their legacy? Marcus's life tests the limits of Stoic claims about happiness and virtue. Yet despite everything, Marcus persevered. This perseverance itself is perhaps his greatest lesson. Life will be hard. You will face losses, disappointments, betrayals, failures. People will not meet your expectations. Your own efforts will fall short. The world will not conform to your ideals. But you continue anyway. You get up each morning and do the work you were made for. You try to be good even when it seems futile. You maintain your principles even when they cost you. This is not joyful, triumphant heroism. This is tired, persistent, unglamorous courage. The courage to keep going when you are exhausted, to keep trying when you have failed before, to keep caring when cynicism would be easier. This is the courage that most people need most of the time, and Marcus exemplifies it. As you drift toward sleep now, carry with you these final reflections on Marcus Aurelius. A man not so different from any of us, dealing with problems not so different from ours, finding ways to endure and to maintain dignity despite everything. His empire is gone. His son failed. His body turned to dust long ago. But his words remain, offering guidance, comfort, and inspiration to anyone willing to read them. Sleep well, knowing that the struggles you face have been faced before and will be faced again. That you are part of a long human story of trying to be good in a difficult world. That your efforts matter even if they do not always succeed. That virtue is its own reward, that the present moment is all you truly have, that death is natural and not to be feared. Good night. When morning comes, remember Marcus's words. Rise to do the work of a human being with courage, with wisdom, with justice, with moderation. This is enough. This has always been enough. Good night. When morning comes, remember Marcus's words. Rise to do the work of a human being with courage, with wisdom, with justice, with moderation. This is enough. This has always been enough. In closing this journey through the life and philosophy of Marcus Aurelius, let us reflect on why this ancient emperor's words continue to resonate with such power in our modern age. What is it about a text written 2,000 years ago in a language most of us cannot read, by a man whose daily life bore little resemblance to ours, that still speaks so directly to contemporary concerns? Part of the answer lies in the universality of human experience. Despite all the technological and social changes that separate our world from Marcus's, the fundamental challenges of being human remain remarkably constant. We still struggle with difficult people. We still face loss and disappointment. We still must find meaning in routine duties. We still wrestle with the knowledge of our own mortality. We still seek to be good even when the path is unclear. These timeless aspects of the human condition are what Meditations addresses, which is why its relevance endures. But there is something more specific to our current historical moment that makes Marcus particularly relevant. We live in an age of unprecedented anxiety and uncertainty. Climate change, technological disruption, political polarization, economic precarity, pandemic threats. The list of challenges facing contemporary society is daunting. Many people feel overwhelmed, powerless, unsure how to navigate a rapidly changing world. In this context, Stoic philosophy offers something valuable. A framework for focusing on what you can control while accepting what you cannot. This is not resignation or defeatism. Stoicism does not counsel giving up or becoming passive. Rather, it teaches directing your energy wisely toward where it can make a difference. You cannot single-handedly solve global warming, but you can reduce your own carbon footprint and support effective policies. You cannot eliminate political division, but you can engage respectfully with those who disagree. You cannot prevent all suffering, but you can help specific people in specific ways. This kind of practical wisdom is what modern readers often seek in Meditations. The discipline of distinguishing between what is within your power and what is not has obvious applications to contemporary life. Social media bombards us with information about problems we cannot solve, injustices we cannot personally remedy, threats we cannot individually prevent. This creates a sense of helplessness and anxiety. Marcus's teaching to focus on your own thoughts and actions provides a counterbalance, a way to maintain agency and sanity amid the flood of troubling information. Similarly, the Stoic practice of examining your own judgments before reacting to events has clear value in an era of instant communication and knee-jerk responses. How many conflicts could be avoided if people paused to consider whether their interpretation of events was accurate before firing off an angry email or social media post? Marcus's counsel to separate events from your judgments about them is remarkably applicable to digital communication. The theme of maintaining perspective by contemplating mortality and cosmic insignificance might seem morbid, but for many modern readers it provides relief from the tyranny of self-importance. Our problems feel overwhelming partly because we magnify their significance. Stepping back to consider that in 100 years everyone currently alive will be dead, that in 1,000 years our entire civilization may be forgotten, that from a cosmic perspective Earth is a tiny speck in an incomprehensibly vast universe. This perspective does not make our problems meaningless, but it does make them more manageable. We can care about things without being consumed by them. The rise of mindfulness meditation in Western culture over the past few decades has created an audience primed to appreciate Stoic practices. The emphasis on present moment awareness, on observing thoughts without being controlled by them, on accepting things as they are, these are common to both Stoic philosophy and contemporary mindfulness practice. Marcus was doing a form of mindfulness meditation 2,000 years before the term existed. Modern practitioners who discover this historical depth often find their practice enriched. The practical, action-oriented nature of Stoicism also appeals to contemporary readers who may be suspicious of abstract philosophy but hungry for concrete guidance. Meditations does not spend much time on theoretical metaphysics or epistemology. It focuses on how to live, how to act, how to think. This pragmatic emphasis resonates with people seeking applicable wisdom rather than academic theory. The personal nature of meditations creates an unusual intimacy between author and reader. When you read philosophy textbooks, you are being taught. When you read meditations, you are overhearing someone think. This feels different, more personal, more honest. You see Marcus's struggles, his repeated reminders to himself of principles he keeps forgetting, his ongoing effort to be better than he is. This makes him an accessible role model rather than an intimidating example of perfection. For people in positions of leadership or responsibility, Marcus provides a compelling model of how to exercise power ethically. How do you remain grounded when you have authority over others? How do you make difficult decisions that affect many people? How do you balance competing demands and constituencies? How do you maintain integrity when expedience tempts? Marcus faced all these challenges at the highest level, and while he did not always succeed, his effort to apply philosophical principles to governance offers valuable guidance. The question of work-life balance, so prominent in contemporary discourse, appears in Meditations in different terms. Marcus struggled with the tension between his duties as emperor and his desire for philosophical contemplation. He would have preferred a quiet life of study and reflection, but duty called him to constant labor. His solution was to find meaning in the duty itself, to see work as part of living according to nature rather than as an unfortunate necessity separate from real life. This integration of work and philosophy, of duty and meaning, offers an alternative to the modern tendency to see work and life as separate spheres. The theme of accepting what you cannot change while working to improve what you can has obvious applications to personal circumstances. Many people struggle with regret about the past or anxiety about the future. Stoicism teaches focusing on the present moment, on current choices and actions. The past cannot be changed. Dwelling on it serves no purpose beyond learning lessons. The future is uncertain. Worrying about it is largely pointless. What matters is what you do now in this moment. This teaching can be profoundly liberating. Marcus's wrestling with difficult people provides guidance for a universal challenge. We all must deal with individuals who frustrate, anger, or disappoint us. Marcus's approach, understanding that people act according to their nature, that they cannot help being who they are, that they deserve compassion rather than hatred, is easier to endorse in principle than to practice consistently. But the ideal remains valuable. Imagine how different our relationships would be if we truly internalized the idea that everyone is doing the best they can with the understanding they have. The acceptance of mortality that pervades Meditations addresses what many consider the fundamental human challenge. How do we live knowing we will die? Marcus's answer: by recognizing that death is natural, that fearing it is pointless, that what matters is how we live while we are here. This does not eliminate the fear of death. Marcus was human after all, but it provides a framework for thinking about mortality that many find helpful. The question of legacy arises repeatedly in Meditations. Marcus was acutely aware that fame is fleeting, that even the mightiest emperors are eventually forgotten. This could be depressing, but Marcus drew a different conclusion. Since external legacy is uncertain and ultimately unimportant, what matters is living virtuously now. Your true legacy is not what others remember but what you actually were and did. This shifts focus from reputation to character, from posterity to present. For modern readers struggling with the performative aspects of social media culture, this teaching has particular resonance. We are encouraged to curate our image, to craft a personal brand, to seek validation through likes and shares. Marcus would say this is wasted effort. Who you actually are matters more than who people think you are. What you actually do matters more than what you appear to do. This is countercultural wisdom in an age of image management. The resilience that Marcus demonstrated through prolonged crisis, plague, war, personal loss, offers a model for anyone facing sustained difficulty. He did not give up, did not become bitter, did not abandon his principles. He maintained his effort at virtue even when external circumstances were terrible. This kind of persistent courage is what most people need in their lives, not dramatic heroism but the quiet strength to keep going. Looking at Marcus's life as a whole, we see someone who tried to integrate philosophy and practice, thought and action, principle and pragmatism. He was not perfect at this integration. No one is, but his sustained effort across decades is inspiring. We see that living philosophically is not about achieving some final state of wisdom but about continuing to try, day after day, to align your actions with your values. The tragic elements of Marcus's story, the children who died, the son who failed, the empire that weakened, remind us that even the best efforts do not guarantee desired outcomes. You can do everything right and still face tragedy. This is not a reason for despair but for focusing on what you can control: your own character, your own efforts, your own virtue. The universe does not owe you success or happiness, but it cannot prevent you from being good unless you allow it. In our final moments with Marcus's story, we might reflect on what it means to leave a legacy. Marcus's material accomplishments, the wars won, the administration reformed, the buildings erected, are mostly forgotten or attributed incorrectly. But his thoughts, captured in meditations, have influenced millions. This seems appropriate for a Stoic who taught that external things are ultimately indifferent. The empire is gone but the philosophy endures. For those who will turn to meditations after learning of Marcus's life, the journey continues. The work is not long, perhaps a few hours to read straight through. But it is meant to be read slowly, repeatedly, meditatively. It is a book to return to again and again, finding new insights each time, being reminded of principles you have forgotten, encountering words that speak directly to your current situation. Marcus would be surprised, perhaps even embarrassed, to know that his private journal has been read by millions, translated into dozens of languages, analyzed in academic papers, and quoted in commencement speeches. He wrote for himself, to strengthen his own resolve, to remind himself of principles he valued. That these reminders have proven valuable to countless others across 2 millennia is a testament to both the universality of human struggle and the enduring power of sincere philosophical reflection. As you close your eyes now, let these final thoughts accompany you into sleep. You are part of a long chain of humans trying to live well. Marcus tried, we try, future generations will try. None of us will be perfect, but the effort matters. Each day offers new opportunities to practice virtue, to help others, to align ourselves with nature. Each setback is a chance to demonstrate resilience. Each interaction is an opportunity to show compassion. Each moment is all we truly have. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, Stoic philosopher, struggling human being, speaks to us still. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. May you find that strength. May you use it well. May you sleep in peace and wake ready to do the work of a human being. The story of Marcus Aurelius is not just history. It is a living example, a continuing conversation, an ongoing invitation to examine our own lives and try to live them better. His words wait for anyone who needs them, offering wisdom earned through suffering, perspective gained through responsibility, and hope maintained through philosophy. Good night. Sleep well. And remember, you are capable of more than you think. The struggle is worth it. The effort is the point. Be good, be courageous, be kind. This is the way. This has always been the way.